Late autumn, the cold wind whistled through the bare branches of the trees, and the darkness tightly embraced the earth. Mary, a little girl, with big, frightened eyes, tightly held John's hand, her older brother. They walked along a dark, rural road, 10 kilometers, to their grandmother's house, which stood alone on the edge of a neighboring village. Mother ordered them to take medicine to their grandmother, and although it was already late, they could not disobey. John, although he was also scared, carefully tried to cheer up Mary. "Don't be afraid, Mary, we will soon be at our grandmother's. She will treat us to hot tea and pies." But this didn't really help. Mary still trembled. Suddenly, very unexpectedly, from the darkness, a pair of scary and burning red eyes appeared. A huge and evil black wolf, dark as night, stood motionless in the middle of the road. His fur was tousled, and his muzzle twisted into a sinister smile. The children simply froze from this horror. John, although he tried to appear brave, felt how a cold wave of fear rolled down his spine. The wolf took a step forward, and John and Mary started running. They ran as fast as they could, but the big wolf did not fall behind. His terrible, sinister howl tore through the night silence. In despair, they turned off the road and ran into the dense forest, hoping that they could hide there. But this forest turned out to be even scarier than the road. Trees, covered with moss, seemed gloomy giants, reaching towards them with their crooked arms, branches intertwined above their heads, creating a dark, long tunnel where nothing was visible except the dim light coming from the moon. They ran, stumbling over tree roots and falling into pits. The wolf's howl still echoed somewhere behind, but they could not determine where it was coming from. Mary cried, and John, although he was also scared, tried to calm her down. Suddenly, they realized they were lost. They wandered around the forest for a long time, but could not find the way. The darkness thickened, the strong cold pierced them to the bone. They sat under a large oak tree, hugging to keep warm. Mary trembled with fear, and John, although he tried to appear strong, felt tears rolling down his cheeks. Suddenly, they heard a quiet whisper. It came from the depths of the forest. The whisper was cold and sinister, and from it, goosebumps ran down their skin. "You are lost, children," whispered a terrible voice. "You will never get out of this forest." The children shuddered from horror. They knew that it was the voice of the forest, a cursed place where the souls of those who could not find the way out of the forest were lost. They knew that the wolf was only the first harbinger of the evil that lurked in this forest, and they knew that if they didn't find the way by morning, they would forever remain here in the realm of darkness and fear. The whisper of the forest grew louder, smoothly turning into a hoarse muttering. The children felt fear from every sound, feeling how cold fear pierced their bodies. Suddenly, between the trees, a pale figure appeared. She slowly approached, and the children saw that it was an old woman with long, gray hair and burning, red eyes. "Are you looking for the road, children?" she croaked in her rough voice. "I can help you." John, although scared, understood that they had no choice. He nodded, and the old, gray-haired woman smiled, showing them sharp yellow teeth. "Come with me," she whispered. "I know where the road to your grandmother's is." They followed her, making their way through the dense thickets. The old woman walked quickly and silently. She seemed to know every path in this cursed forest. Suddenly, they came out into a small, beautiful clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old wooden house, covered with moss and cobwebs. "This is your grandmother's house," whispered the old woman. "She is waiting for you." The children looked at each other, surprised and intently. They knew that their grandmother's house stood on the edge of the village, and not in the depths of the scary forest, but the old, gray-haired woman had already opened the door and invited them inside the house. The house was dark and very cold, and the air inside smelled of dampness and mold. In the corner of the room, a small fireplace burned, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the house. "Sit down, children," the old woman croaked. "I will make tea for you." She took an old kettle from the shelf and put it on the fire. The children sat on a bench by the fireplace, trying to warm up. Suddenly, they heard a quiet knock at the door of the house. "Look, it's your grandmother," whispered the old woman. "She has come for you." The children shuddered with fear. They knew that it was definitely not their grandmother. They knew that it was someone else, someone who lived in this cursed forest. The old woman opened the door and a tall man in a long black cloak entered the room. His face was pale and distorted and his eyes burned with red fire. "Did you bring me the children?" he said. "Yes, master," whispered the old and gray-haired woman. "They got lost in the forest." The man smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Wonderful," said the tall man. "I'll take care of them." The children screamed in horror, but it was already too late. The tall man in the long black cloak grabbed them and dragged them into the darkness. They heard the door closing behind them and thought they would never see the light of day again. The man in the black cloak led them through a narrow, long corridor, lit only by the small light of a candle. They passed dark, scary rooms, from which strange sounds were heard, whispers, screams, creaks. Finally, they found themselves in a large room, with a high ceiling. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, on which lay strange objects, bones, dried flowers, old books with incomprehensible symbols. "Sit down, children," said the man. "We will play a game." He took an old deck of cards from under the table and laid them out on the table. "These are the cards of fate," he said. "They will show you your future." He began to lay out the cards, and the children saw, with horror, how scary images appeared on the cards: graves, skulls, ghosts. "Your future is dark and bleak," said the man. "You will never get out of this forest." Mary cried, and John, although he tried to appear brave, felt a cold wave of despair roll down his spine. "But there is one way," said the man. "You can stay here in this forest and faithfully serve me." The children looked at him with horror. "Never," John shouted. "We will never serve evil." The man became angry, his eyes flashed with red fire, and his face twisted into a sinister smile. "Then you will die," said the man. He took a knife into his hands and lunged at the children. John pushed Mary away, and with his foot hit the tall man's hand. The blow was so strong that the knife fell from his hands. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the room. It was their grandmother, who had come for the children. She held an old cross in her hands, and from it came a glow that warded off evil. "Get out, filth," she shouted. "These children are my grandchildren." The tall man in the black cloak screamed loudly in pain and disappeared into the darkness. Grandma came to the children and hugged them. "It's all right, children," she said. "I'm here." She led the children out of the cursed house and led them to the exit from the cursed forest. They walked for a long time and finally saw the light of the morning sun. They came out of the forest and saw their grandmother's house, which stood on the edge of the village. They ran to it. "I was so worried about you, children," said grandmother. "I knew you were in trouble." The children told her everything that had happened in that forest. Grandmother shook her head. "This forest is cursed," she said. "It takes the souls of those who get lost, but you are safe because I protected you." They entered the house and grandmother treated them to hot tea and pies. They sat by the fireplace and warmth spread through their bodies. They had experienced a terrible adventure, but they also knew that they were stronger than ever. They knew that they had experienced evil, but they also knew that good always triumphs over evil.